Hello, and welcome to the Paging Dr. Cohen podcast with your host, Dr. Gordon Cohen, MD, PhD, MBA.
And so my goal is to make medicine as understandable as possible. No funny language, no complicated verbiage, just plain old conversation.
Let's call in the doctor.
Paging Dr. Cohen.
This is Seattle's Morning News. Dave Ross with Colleen O'Brien and Chris Sullivan. I got an email from a listener who is worried about the vaccine. He's not going to take it because it contains human genetic material, and he's worried that might mess with your genes. So let's call in the doctor.
Paging Dr. Cohen.
Dr. Gordon Cohen, MD. So Dr. Cohen, is there, and I shared the letter with you, should there be any concern that the genetic material in this vaccine could, over the long term, be harmful?
So let me start by saying, Dave, I can understand how people would have anxiety about this particular vaccine. First of all, as we've talked about before, the fastest a vaccine had ever been made was 4 years, and that was for the mumps. And this came out in under a year. Again, something we've talked about before is, although this vaccine came out in record time, the science and research behind building a vaccine in this manner have been worked on for a decade, for a full 10 years. So although it came out quickly, the science behind it was not new. So I think people are in general concerned because they think that we're injecting genetic material into the body, which we are, but that somehow it could mix with your own genetic material and change it. But there are really some pretty important differences between our DNA, which carries all of the information that we inherited from our parents, and then mRNA, which the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines are made of. Now, first off, DNA is double-stranded and is wound up inside the nucleus of the cell, the center of the cell. But mRNA is actually a single-stranded copy of just a little piece of the DNA that is routinely made inside the nucleus, but then it's released out into the cell. So it carries instructions that are just, quote, read-only, like when you see on your computer, read-only, these are read-only proteins. The vaccine was developed by taking a common part of the virus, the spike proteins. Those are the proteins that allow the virus to enter our cells. And they took a little bit of the mRNA for that. And they said, okay, this is a uniform part of the virus. So if we take mRNA and we synthesize it, but we put it inside little tiny fat particles that we can inject it into the body, the fat will dissolve and expose the body to all this mRNA. And when the body gets exposed to this mRNA, remember it's read-only, the body will then develop antibodies to this mRNA that is part of the spike protein. So it can't actually do anything. It can't actually change our genetic material because it's just something that's part of the virus that our body recognizes being foreign. And like I said, it's read-only. It sounds scary. It's completely not possible.
And I know that this Johnson & Johnson vaccine is supposed to be quite effective against the new strains that have cropped up. When will we know that for sure?
That's one of the biggest areas of research and study right now is how dangerous are these new variants and how problematic are they? And that's where sort of the J&J vaccine stands out because it was tested at a different time period. And the J&J vaccine was nearly 82% effective against severe forms of COVID in South Africa. So that suggests that the vaccine may actually be sufficient to protect people against serious disease that's caused by this very highly transmissible South African variant. And it was also 88% effective against severe COVID-19 cases in Brazil, where there was another highly transmissible variant that had kind of gained some traction. So, we can't really make direct comparisons between the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines to the J&J vaccine because they were tested at different time points in different places in the world under different circumstances. And what's notable about it is that it can be stored in much more hospitable circumstances, making it more available in doctors' offices and pharmacies and whatnot.
Well, that's good news. Plus, we hear that the Pfizer vaccine doesn't have to be kept at 95 degrees below zero anymore. So a vaccine of some kind ought to be showing up at my local pharmacy within, few days, few weeks, few months?
Again, look, everything with this illness, with the treatment, with the vaccines, it's all emerging. We're learning as we go. And so, they wanted to be very careful up front about the vaccine and how they stored it and whatnot. And those were the laboratory conditions under which they produced it, and they believed to be the case. But they may find out over time that that's not the case.
Dr. Gordon Cohen, MD. Dr. Cohen, thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, please tell a friend, rate, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Stay up to date on Twitter by using the handle Paging Dr. Cohen, or simply send us an email with any comments or medical questions to podcast@pagingdrcohen.com. This podcast also supports the American Heart Association. Please visit heart.org and consider giving a contribution by clicking the Donate Now button in the top right corner. Thanks again for listening, and stay safe.